There's been a lot of talk recently about trigger warnings, and the thing I find interesting about trigger warnings is that all of a sudden, and by all of a sudden I mean maybe the past 6 or 7 years, a trigger warning has become to develop a negative connotation. But the people who associate trigger warnings or being triggered, as they say, as a negative thing, don't seem to realise that trigger warnings have been around for a very, very long time. Ever since I was a kid, I remember seeing warnings about strobe lighting in performances. It would come up before a performance happened, saying this performance contains flashing lights and may trigger people with epilepsy. And I remember my mum having to explain to me what exactly epilepsy was and why strobe lights or certain sort of lighting conditions can trigger a fit. That is a trigger warning. And it's not the sort of trigger warning that people who associate it negatively would think of when they're thinking of all these people who get triggered and need warnings before they consume certain things. They don't seem to realise that usually a trigger warning is there to protect a person, to keep them safe, to make sure that they are okay. Just like the epilepsy ones that have been going on for as long as I can remember. But you wouldn't see people being accused of being a snowflake for needing an epileptic warning before a performance, although judging how some people get on these days, it does sound like something Andrew Tate might say, but I digress. My point of the matter is that trigger warnings have always been there. And what I've seen recently, I've seen articles popping up everywhere about censorship and trigger warnings and altering text. I did a video a couple of months ago about the changes they're making to Roald Dahl's books because of certain language that could offend people. There was such a big backlash about that they are releasing the ordinary Roald Dahl text alongside these new edited versions to make sure that the words of Roald Dahl are preserved, which I will admit is better than just completely putting Roald Dahl's words out of print. However, in the place of editing work and changing the intent of the creator in some way or another, trigger warnings are now being put in front of media, whether it be movies, books, TV shows, to warn the consumer about the content and if it could potentially trigger something in them. And like I say, the word trigger has kind of developed a negative kind of connection for people because it's seen as the triggered people who get offended over anything. But usually a trigger warning that is put before something, or at least the trigger warnings that I've always encountered, usually have a serious message to them and have a reason for being there. Whether it be for mental health reasons, for actual health reasons, a trigger warning is put there to make sure that a person, the consumer, whoever is taking in this media, is protected and kept safe and isn't affected by what they're about to consume. An example I saw recently that made me want to make this video was that apparently before The Sound of Music, there is now a trigger warning about the war. There's a trigger warning about the war and about Nazism and that it's all in this story and to be wary of that going in. And personally, and this is coming from someone who hasn't fought in a war, has never been old enough to fight in a war, and hopefully will never have to fight in a war. I've been very fortunate in that regard. I do see the need for a trigger warning about war, about people who have not necessarily have experienced World War II or Nazism, but have experienced war in any capacity. We don't know what it's like to have PTSD. Only the people with PTSD know what it's like to have PTSD. And the trigger warning is there for them, so that they are aware going in that there may be something in the story that could trigger their PTSD. Usually these people who complain about a trigger warning being for sensitive snowflakes, usually the warnings aren't for them. And obviously they aren't going to understand why a warning is put there because they don't understand what the person or people who need the warnings are going through, and they probably never will. And personally, I would rather that a trigger warning is put before a piece of media as opposed to changing it. I would rather there was a trigger warning in front of Roald Dahl's books, whether I agree with it or not, saying that Augustus Gloop was called fat or there's certain language that people might find offending, instead of them going and changing the words of Roald Dahl. Even if some of the trigger warnings border on ridiculous, like the one I use, for example, about Augustus Gloop, or about the twits being called ugly, and even if there was a trigger warning about that, I would prefer that than people going against the wishes of Roald Dahl, who explicitly said that he did not want people changing his work. To go ahead and do that anyway, in order to not offend people. I don't know about you, but the trigger warning seems like the lesser of two evils here. I think it is much better, whether you like a trigger warning or not, to see a quick message before a movie, a book, or a TV show starts saying, hey, there may be some stuff in here that relates to this, this, and this, and you might find that offensive, or someone you know might find that offensive. So if that's not your thing, switch off, close the book, tune off. It sounds a lot better to me than changing things to fit the narrative of the person who has decided, I don't like this, I'm gonna change it. At least with a trigger warning, everything stays the same. There's just a warning at the start of it. It seems to make a lot more sense to me, personally, than going ahead and altering everything, because who gets to decide who has the right to alter things? Who gets to decide who has the right to change something to fit their personal opinion on what is offensive? At least if loads of people find a certain thing offensive, the quick warning can be put at the start, and then the movie or the TV show or whatever stays the same. Nothing's been changed. There's just a warning. To me, that seems a lot less bad than going ahead and changing something to fit your own preference. But hey, that's just me. I know this video is shorter than my usual ones, but I saw an article about trigger warnings pop up on my phone, and I was just kind of like, God, I'm fed up of seeing people complain about this. Because usually it is people who don't need trigger warnings who complain about trigger warnings, but then they're also usually the people who seek out being offended because they don't have anything to be offended by, or they want to feel marginalized or attacked in some way, so they invent stuff to be marginalized and attacked by. So they say that I hate trigger warnings just so that they have something to be complaining about, because these people need to be complaining about something. I don't know, it's like their lifeblood or something. Like they can't sustain themselves any other way. But regardless, I just wanted to make a quick video talking about that because it's been a while since I uploaded last, and I do have opinions, as you can tell. I always have opinions. Whether people care or not is another thing, but I care, and that's what's important. Anyway, that's it for this video. Short and sweet one today. I'll see you next time, guys. Like, comment, and subscribe. Don't do any of that if you don't want to. I don't want you there if you don't want to be there. Check out my book on Amazon. It is free on Kindle Unlimited, or it is available on Kindle Exclusive. Again, don't do that if you don't want to. I don't want you there if you don't want to be there. And remember, putting a trigger warning quickly in front of something is much, much better than altering the content within. Okay? Okay. Good. Just imagine I'm clicking my fingers with a thumbs up because I'm not on camera today. Bye-bye!